Now let's move to international news. And France has begun its second phase of easing lockdown rules from today. The new measures include the reopening of more schools, restaurants and bars where COVID-19 is least active. Coronavirus cases continue to drop in the country. Positive cases now stand at just over 150,000. Joining us via Skype now is the French ambassador to South Africa, Aurélien Lechevallier. Good evening, Ambassador. Thank you very much for your time. It certainly seems that France is through the worst. I understand that for about 7 days now, there have been a drop in the deaths. It's less than 100 a day. And the lockdown, I understand, is that being lifted because we are through the worst.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sally. Good evening, and thanks for having me. Indeed, we're trying to move forward. It seems that the peak of the epidemic may be behind us, even if we want to be very cautious. And, the possibility of a second wave of a spread is always possible. But we were hit quite hard. Last year we had a good economic growth. We attracted a lot of foreign investment. And then, of course, with the epidemic, everything went very, very difficult. So now we are trying to move on and taking new measures step by step.
I understand that different to us where we have levels 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, that in France it's colour-coded. Red is the worst, and that Paris is now on orange level, which means, for example, that some of your restaurants can open, but only the outdoor restaurants. Just tell us a little bit more about the easing and whether Paris is starting to get back to the Paris that we know.
Yes, we have indeed this color code with red, orange and green, depending on our provinces. And now Paris is shifting into orange. It means that we can reopen schools, we can reopen businesses, we can reopen the boutiques, the shops, and also the public transportations. But of course, for each and every one of these sectors, we have to respect a lot of regulations, wearing masks, for example, in the public transportations, or to respect the social distancing at the cafe terraces or outside the restaurants. So again, it's a gradual change. We are trying to move step by step to strike the right balance between the health emergency, the social consequences, and the economic recovery.
Let's talk about schooling, because I know that sort of middle of the month, last month, there was some schools were reopening and then there were some outbreaks, which we are told, of course, is inevitable, but it led to a lot of anxiety and some of the schools were closed. I understand some are reopening now. Just tell us a little bit about that process and how you've gauged the safety of when it is safe to reopen schools. It's such a hot topic for us here in South Africa at the moment, of course.
No, of course, I think there are questions everywhere. First of all, obviously, we need to respect these health protocols, but also in case of a new contagion, there were the closing of schools. We are trying also to work on a voluntary basis, so only the families who want the pupils to go back to school are going back to school. And, I think the most important reason for the reopening right now, it's also to fight against the inequalities, because in certain vulnerable communities, vulnerable neighborhoods, it was very hard for the children to be out of the schooling system. And so it was important for us to do everything we could to reopen at least partly the schools as quickly as we could.
And we know that there have been almost 29,000 deaths in France from COVID-19, and hopefully, as you say, the worst is over. But what about the lasting financial impacts and the ability of the French economy to recover? Are you able to quantify when it will be recovered, how long it might take?
Well, the impact was very tough. For example, last month, we had an increase of 22% of our employment rates compared with last year. We know that probably the recession for the year 2020 will be around -6%. So that's a big economic shock. but we will try to do everything we can to have a speedy recovery. There is a lot of support from the private sector and from the public fundings and from the European fundings. And again, I think the main idea now is really to bounce back and to help all the sectors, including also the tourism sector that is going back on track right now. We insist also a lot on the international cooperation. It's very important to continue to engage with our partners, such as South Africa and the African continent as a whole, to make sure that for our companies, there will be a speedy recovery in the next month.
Well, thank you very much for your time this evening. That was French Ambassador to South Africa, Aurélien Lechevallier, joining us this evening.